woman with power will always be mistaken for a problem before she's seen as a person. What begins with a traffic stop will spiral into something no one saw coming. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from before the real story begins. Her hands never shook. Even as a child, Rosemary Maguire's hands were still as stone. Even when her mother's voice cracked during late-night prayers, or when the world told her a black girl from Crenshaw County shouldn't dream too high. Now, decades later, those same hands had held command posts on 2 continents, had held grieving mothers who had no sons left, had held the flag over caskets folded too tight. But this right here was the first time those hands were behind her back, cuffed in the dirt, while 2 officers snorted above her like she was roadkill that dared to breathe. "You think you slicked with that tone, huh?" The younger one, Officer Chad Milner, bent over slightly, his mouth too close to her ear, reeking of cheap gum and cheaper confidence. "Smart mouth ain't gonna save you out here, sweetheart." She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her uniform was neatly folded in the suitcase in her trunk, 4 stars stitched into its shoulders, and her name, General Rosemary Maguire, carried enough weight in D.C. to raise battalions with a phone call. But right now, none of that mattered. Because Officer Milner didn't ask for her license before he told her to step out. Because she had asked, calmly, "What's the reason for the stop, officer?" Because the moment she spoke with poise and not panic, the old one, Sergeant Paul Dykes, decided he didn't like the way she sounded like she ran the damn state. "You folks got a problem with authority," Dykes said, kneeling down with a smirk. "But don't worry. We'll remind you who's in charge." From the gravel shoulder of Highway 77, the pine trees bowed in the distance like silent witnesses. Cars slowed as they passed, but none stopped. Maybe they didn't see. Or maybe they did and told themselves it wasn't what it looked like. Her watch vibrated 3 times. Not a tremble. A signal. Buried inside the titanium bezel was a small chip, installed 3 years ago at the request of a Pentagon colleague who had lost her husband in a roadside abduction. It was discreet, automatic, and once activated, it did one thing: call the Pentagon's direct emergency operations line and send real-time location data. "You twitchin'? You nervous?" Milner chuckled as he yanked her arms upward unnecessarily. "Ain't nobody comin' to save you. Don't matter who you think you are." She closed her eyes. She thought of her mother's kitchen. The smell of red beans simmering, the humming of Swing Low, Sweet Chariot from a tired throat. The Sunday mornings where every scar, emotional, racial, military, melted under warm biscuits and slow forgiveness. She was coming home to that. She was supposed to be home by now. "You're being recorded," she said, her voice cool and even, "by more people than you realize." "Is that a threat?" Dykes barked. "It's a fact." The moment they threw her into the back of the cruiser, her phone, still in the car's center console, buzzed in sync with the Pentagon line. She knew it wouldn't take long. But time had a way of stretching when you were being humiliated. The cuffs clicked tighter. Her knees were scratched. Blood beaded under the dark fabric of her slacks. She felt the cool steel of her medals in the suitcase, now tossed haphazardly in the grass during their so-called search for narcotics, as though they could scream out for her. But medals don't speak. Men like Dykes, oh listen, and towns like this don't forget who they think you used to be. Behind the cruiser, the second squad car finally arrived, and with it, a third officer. New, hesitant, and unsure why 2 senior officers were detaining a middle-aged black woman in tailored slacks who hadn't resisted a single order. She heard him murmur something to Milner. Then a pause. "You're gonna want to come look at this," the rookie said, holding up the phone he'd just picked up from her car. Rosemary kept her head down, her thoughts sharp. She was calculating the sequence of what was to come, the chain of command, the level of exposure this would unleash, and just how many of these men were ready for the fallout. "Don't matter who she is," Dykes muttered. "She made us look stupid." "You did that all by yourself," Rosemary whispered, low enough for only Dykes to hear. He stiffened. In the silence that followed, her watch buzzed again. Once. Then twice. Then a third time. It wasn't a distress signal anymore. It was a confirmation. The Pentagon knew. And if the Pentagon knew, Washington, still cuffed, still bloodied, still composed, she lifted her eyes toward the rearview mirror inside the cruiser. Her reflection stared back, steadfast, patient, and waiting. Not for justice, for reckoning, and it had already begun. At precisely 4:16 p.m., a soft chime sounded in the Situation Room. Colonel Marcus Ellison stood over the comms desk, blinking at the alert pulsing on the secured console. He didn't need a second glance to recognize the source ID. Maguire, Rosemary J. 4-star general, high priority, and most importantly, his former commanding officer. He didn't hesitate. "Route this through to Operations Command and notify Director Rucka immediately. Code Indigo 12. No delay." Across the Pentagon, gears began to turn. Quietly, but with urgency. Not a single person in the chain of response asked if it was a mistake. Nobody questioned whether a signal had been misfired. Because people like Rosemary Maguire didn't press that button by accident. Meanwhile, back in Crenshaw County, a barely functioning AC unit rattled in the corner of the sheriff's office. Sheriff Ron Levitt, sleeves rolled up and eyes glazed over with the slow lull of small-town routine, barely glanced up from his barbecue takeout when the front door buzzed open. Paul Dykes stepped in first, pushing the door wide with the same wide-legged walk he'd had since high school football. Behind him, Chad Milner followed, less confident now, a flicker of doubt chewing at the edges of his bravado. "You Booker?" Levitt asked without lifting his head, slathering sauce onto a cornbread muffin. "She's in holding," Dykes replied, tossing a folder onto the counter. "No ID on her. Name's Maguire. Says she's from D.C. Says Zebit smirked. What's she actually got in the car?" Milner rubbed the back of his neck. "Government plates. Military tags. Trunk had clothes, files, a badge. Looking ID, didn't look fake." Levitt finally looked up. "Badge looking. Sir, I think she's—" Milner hesitated. "She said she's a general." Dykes scoffed. "You're going to believe every suit with a story now." "She didn't blink, sir," Milner said, his voice quieter. "Didn't yell, didn't beg, just told me she's recording and that I should know what I'm doing." Levitt stared for a long second, then pulled the folder closer. "You didn't put that in the report, I bet." "No, sir." "Good." He stood, brushing crumbs from his chest. "I'll go talk to her. Maybe she's someone, maybe she ain't. Either way, we keep it quiet. Y'all didn't do anything wrong." Milner shifted in place. Levitt didn't wait for agreement. He strode down the hallway, his boots heavy on the scuffed linoleum. The holding room was small, more broom closet than cell. Through the single reinforced window, he could see Rosemary sitting upright, back straight, cuffs still locked behind her. He took a breath and opened the door. "Ma'am," he said, with a smile dipped in condescension, "I understand you've had a long day." Her eyes locked onto his, not angry, not afraid, just patient, like he was taking longer than expected. "You have no idea what kind of day I've had, Sheriff," she said. He chuckled. "Well, let's talk about that. My boys tell me you didn't have ID? Had credentials. Your officers tossed them aside." "Military-looking stuff," he said, waving his hand. "People fake that all the time." Rosemary said nothing. "Now, I'd love to help," he continued. But until we verify who you are and why you're driving through our county with Pentagon plates, we've got to follow protocol." "You mean the protocol where officers escalate a traffic stop without probable cause?" Levitt's smile slipped. "I'm not a civilian, Sheriff. I'm not passing through. I'm home. I was born 12 miles from here." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You from Pine Ridge?" "My mother still lives off Holloway Road." "Didn't peg you for local," he said. "I outgrew the place. It seems it didn't outgrow its habits." He studied her carefully. There was no fear in her voice, no tremble, not even fatigue, just a slow burn behind her words, the kind of quiet resolve that made men like him nervous, though they'd never admit it. "Look, this isn't D.C. We don't do the Beltway games down here. I'm not playing." The sheriff's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it. "We can settle this easy," he offered, voice smoother now. "A small fine, maybe a warning. You go on your way." She raised an eyebrow. "You're trying to bribe me with my own freedom?" He tilted his head, pretending confusion. "Ma'am, I'm offering you a way out. I'm not the one who's trapped, Sheriff." A knock echoed on the office's outer door. Not hard, but firm. Then another. Then two more. Rapid. Official. Levitt turned toward the sound, his brow tightening. Dykes poked his head into the hallway. Sheriff? You may want to come out here." Levitt gave Rosemary a final glance. "Don't go anywhere." She smiled slightly, not rising. "Wasn't planning to." Outside, a black SUV had pulled into the dusty gravel lot. No markings, but the plates said everything. D.C. issue, Department of Defense. Two men in dark suits and one woman in a gray pantsuit stood by the vehicle. Levitt stepped outside, suddenly aware of the sauce stain on his shirt. "Afternoon," he said. "Can I help you?" The woman stepped forward, flipping open a leather wallet. Inside, a badge gleamed next to an embedded microchip card. "Director Elise Ray, Pentagon Legal Affairs. We're here for General Rosemary Maguire." Levitt's mouth went dry. "She's been detained, temporarily." Ray cut him off. "You're already being recorded. We received an active distress signal from a senior U.S. military official. Any further obstruction will be treated as interference with federal operations." Levitt stammered. "There's been a misunderstanding. We didn't know." "Did you restrain her?" "It was protocol." "Did you touch her without cause?" She didn't blink. "Do you know what it means when a 4-star general triggers a national security alert?" He said nothing. Ray stepped past him, already moving toward the holding area. "You will release her now. And, Sheriff?" He turned. "You'd best call your lawyer. You're going to need one." By morning, the story was out. Not because the Pentagon leaked it, not because Rosemary herself told us so, but because someone, maybe Milner, maybe a janitor, maybe a conscience too loud to ignore, leaked security footage to a local activist with a following just big enough to make the right noise. And the noise didn't stay small for long. There she was, a black woman in slacks and loafers, face pressed against a dusty squad car window, arms cuffed behind her back, eyes calm and unwavering. The video was grainy, no sound, but it didn't need any, because when they zoomed in on the badge discarded in the grass, a shining, scuffed rectangle bearing the eagle seal of the United States Armed Forces in her name, they knew. Everyone knew. By 8:30 a.m., General Maguire was trending on every major platform. By 9:15, Maya Trent, a hungry 29-year-old political reporter based in Atlanta, was in her car and headed straight to Crenshaw County with her camera gear, 3 burner phones, and a notepad already full of questions. The town didn't even know it yet, but its clock had already started ticking. Inside a small guest room in the back of her mother's house, Rosemary sat in the same posture she'd held in every strategic war meeting for the last 10 years. Shoulders even. Elbows rested on the table. gaze fixed forward. Major Lisa Kendrick sat across from her, scrolling furiously through a tablet. She hadn't slept. The wrinkle in her brow said as much. They're pulling public records. Your service file is sealed, but there's chatter. They're trying to dig up old court testimonies. The town council's been quiet, but... She paused. The sheriff's department put out a statement. One paragraph. Claims you were uncooperative during a traffic safety check. Rosemary didn't react. Lisa went on. They are not denying they cuffed you. Of course they're not. They're daring me to speak first. Do you want to? Not yet. Lisa leaned forward. Ro, this is bad. You're trending globally and not just in activist spaces. You've got senators tagging you in tweets, political commentators arguing over what should happen next. This isn't just about a traffic stop anymore. It never was. Silence settled between them. The only noise came from the kitchen, her mother humming softly, moving between cabinets. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the air, grounding everything like it was still a normal Saturday morning. Rosemary finally stood. They didn't just see a black woman, they saw a problem that couldn't possibly have authority. Lisa nodded. But now they're scared. Rosemary walked to the window, eyes scanning the street where unfamiliar cars had started parking along the curbs. Some were press, some were government, some were probably both. I want you to call Director Rucker, she said. I want a full audit of Crenshaw County's police department, every dime of federal funding, every vehicle, every badge issued in the last 5 years. Lisa blinked. You're going nuclear? They embarrassed me publicly, Rosemary said. Let's return the favor with receipts. She turned sharply. And I want you to call Deja Calhoun. Lisa's eyes widened. The civil rights attorney? She doesn't lose, and she doesn't settle. Outside, Maya Trent stepped from her car, camera strapped around her neck. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from nerves, but anticipation. She knew this story wasn't just a scandal, it was history, being born in real time, in the middle of a town that hadn't updated its justice system since the Reagan years. She walked up the sidewalk, half expecting someone to slam a door in her face. Instead, the door opened before she could knock. Miss Trent? Rosemary's mother greeted her, a soft authority in her voice that echoed her daughter's strength. She's expecting you. Come on in. Maya hadn't expected that. She stepped into the quiet house and was immediately struck by the contrast, the warmth of the home against the storm brewing outside. Family pictures hung crooked on the walls, and a small plant drooped sadly near the door. It was real, lived in, not polished like the myth the media had already started constructing about America's Iron General. She found Rosemary seated at the kitchen table now, sipping tea, her face unreadable. Maya sat down across from her, clicking on the voice recorder, waiting. You're not going to ask me what happened, Rosemary said flatly. I think you're going to tell me what matters, Maya answered. A pause, then a nod. I didn't activate that signal because I was afraid, Rosemary began. I activated it because I knew what came next would be buried if I didn't. I've seen it before. How fast a lie becomes truth if you let the silence grow too long. Maya's pen moved rapidly. Do you want this to become a legal case? Or a national one? Both, Rosemary said, but not for me. Then for who? For every girl who still thinks silence is safer. Back at the sheriff's office, Dykes was already sweating. He stood near the break room doorway, watching Levitt pace back and forth in the office. 2 monitors now displayed news footage. People protesting in front of the Crenshaw County Courthouse. Signs, chants. Justice for Rosa. This is getting out of hand, Dykes muttered. No, Levitt corrected. This is what happens when people with stars on their collars decide to fight back. You think she's going to sue? Levitt gave him a look. Son, I think she's going to burn this whole place down by following every damn rule in the book. That's what scares me. Neither of them noticed the young rookie, Officer Beck, standing just outside the hallway, phone in his pocket, still recording. Eyes wide, face pale. For him, this wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about whether staying quiet made him part of the fire or just more fuel. And out there, far from the station, in homes and offices across the country, people watched. They didn't know everything yet, but they knew one thing for certain. Rosemary Maguire was no one's victim, and she wasn't finished, not even close. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it felt full, like something unseen had settled into the space between every pew, every breath, every stare. There were no reporters inside. Judge Herrera had ordered the press to stay outside, but the walls seemed to pulse with the tension of a nation watching through every leaked hallway photo, every witness tweet, every grainy live stream someone managed to smuggle from a phone hidden under a jacket. Rosemary Maguire sat in the front row. No uniform, just a navy blue pantsuit and a silver pin shaped like an eagle on her lapel. She wasn't here to testify. That had already been done. She wasn't here to plead. The evidence had spoken louder than any words ever could. She was here simply to witness. Sheriff Ron Levitt sat at the defense table, face gray, hands folded too tightly. His lawyer whispered something into his ear, but he didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the jury box, the way a man stares at a ticking clock he can't rewind. Across from him, Deja Cahoon stood with the kind of quiet command that made everyone listen before she even said a word. "Members of the jury," she said, "this isn't just about one traffic stop gone wrong. This is about a system designed to believe the worst about someone based on the color of their skin, before even knowing their name. It's about a woman who had to press a military emergency beacon in her own hometown because the badge no longer protected the people it claimed to serve." She turned slightly, not toward Rosemary but near her, like she knew who needed to hear it most. "You've seen the footage. You've read the reports. You've heard testimony from military personnel, law enforcement, psychologists, and even a rookie cop who finally found the courage to tell the truth. Now, you get to decide if power without accountability is something we still tolerate in this country." She sat down. The courtroom was silent, but it was the kind of silence that holds its breath. Judge Herrera gave his final instructions. The jury filed out. It took 4 hours. Rosemary didn't pace. She didn't fidget. She simply sat, hands folded, staring ahead as if the entire world were a chessboard and she had already seen every piece fall into place. When the door opened and the jury forewoman returned, no one breathed. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Sheriff Ronald Levitt, guilty on all counts." Gasps, then stillness. Levitt didn't move. Rosemary closed her eyes. It wasn't relief. It was completion. 3 days later, the real change began. The Justice Department launched a formal civil rights investigation into the Crenshaw County Sheriff's Office. Within a week, 3 deputies were placed on unpaid leave. By the end of the month, the department was under federal oversight. But what mattered more to Rosemary weren't the headlines. It was the letter she received 2 weeks after the verdict. Typed, signed, delivered by hand. It was from Officer Beck, the rookie. He didn't ask for a meeting, didn't ask to be part of the team. He just wrote. "I didn't speak up at first, because I didn't know if I was allowed to. Now I know silence is a kind of participation, and I won't ever choose that again. Thank you for showing me that doing the right thing doesn't start when you're safe. It starts when you're scared, and still do it anyway." She kept that letter, framed it, hung it in her Pentagon office, right beside a map of every county receiving new DOJ compliance checks. And still Rosemary refused interviews. When Maya Trent called for a sit-down, Rosemary simply said, "Let the facts talk louder than I do." When a popular podcast wanted her to recount the moment she hit the distress signal, she replied, That's not the moment that mattered. The moment that did matter happened 6 weeks later, on a Monday morning in Crenshaw Elementary's gymnasium. There, under rows of handmade paper flags and crookedly taped posters that said "Welcome, General Maggie," Rosemary stood in front of a group of fifth graders and told them without notes what strength looked like. "It looks like knowing who you are," she said, "even when they don't." One little girl raised her hand. "But weren't you scared?" "I was," Rosemary answered. "But scared isn't the same as weak. It just means you're still alive, still fighting, still ready." The girl smiled, wide and missing teeth. At the back of the gym, her mother cried quietly. That same night, Rosemary walked her mother through Holloway Road as the sun set behind the tree line. It was warm, still, peaceful in a way nothing had felt for weeks. "You going back to D.C. soon?" her mother asked. Rosemary smiled. "I think D.C. might have to wait a while. Am I going to let you stay?" "I don't ask permission anymore." Her mother chuckled. "Lord knows you never did." They stood together on the porch as the first stars came out, and for the first time since everything started, Rosemary allowed herself to breathe. Not cautiously, not warily, just breathe. As the badge didn't win, because the system bent, finally, and the truth stood taller than the uniform they tried to drag through the dirt. And because when they tried to silence her, she didn't yell louder. She listened, she planned, and she moved, not alone, but with a wave of justice big enough to knock down any lie that dared stand in its path. That's how revolutions begin, or in chaos, but in clarity. And that's how this one ended, with a woman coming home and finally being seen.